Ahoy VC, welcome to the Personal Oasis. This is the Blind Island, and you see the night lights up. You know what's up. You hear the jazz. You know it's time for another installment of Night Train. And of course, we're going to be continuing on in the series of jazz artists in our collection, and particular ones that we have a larger amount of. And for the keen ear out there, you'll probably know who's coming up next. I'm talking about some tentpole artists here. Last night, talked about Miles Davis. Tonight, we're talking about John Coltrane, the man, the myth, the legend, the spiritual giant of jazz music. Whereas Miles pushed the genre into new, different, adventurous places, John Coltrane went within, and by going inward, he expanded outward. He found different ways of bringing spirituality and spiritualism into jazz music, and you can hear that in every single phrase that he plays. So freaking good. And we're gonna go through the collection that we have, talk a little bit about each album, maybe not in so much detail, but just give you a little bit of a taste. So let's get started. Starting again from the earliest album in the collection, we've got Tenor Conclave. Now this is technically isn't so much a John Coltrane album as it is a collaboration between him and three other incredible jazz artists, Hank Mobley, Zoot Sims, Al Cohn. And I love the fact that it's an interracial affair. You know, he's playing it up with some, white cats on here, and I love that. And, Coltrane hasn't fully developed his sound on this. I would say that Hank Mobley's probably the one that's laying down the most smoke on this record, but this is still a very good album. This is a later reissue from 1965. This was originally issued, I believe, in 1955. So Coltrane was still a very young man at this time. But he's still there. He's kicking it with some big league guys. So it's pretty cool to see him. And next, I've got Kenny Burrell and John Coltrane. This is a really nice album, but it's a little misleading because you're expecting, saxophone wizardry, guitar wizardry, two giants of their craft coming together, going to be playing solos off one another. It really isn't that. There's a lot more attention brought to the piano and the bass. It really is a quartet sort of setting. And in fact, there isn't really a lot of tunes where it's just Kenny and John. It is a little disappointing because of that, but it's still a really, really great album. It's nice and laid back, which is not what you'd be expecting from John Coltrane. But this is a later 60s reissue, still in beautiful shape. Originals of these go for crazy money, and I'm very happy with this 60s reissue. Came out in, I want to say 57, but again, don't quote me. So, pretty cool album. Next is what we got playing right now, and that would be John Coltrane's Giant Steps. This is his moment when he went from being the kid that could really play. I think that Blue Train was what created him to be a superstar. This is what created him to be a visionary genius. I think that he came up with his whole idea of sheets of sound on this, flying down the scales, the keys, creating new patterns of playing the saxophone that had never been heard before. Absolute genius stuff. And if you're looking for Still really nice, listenable jazz, but it's a little harder hitting. Then this is absolutely an album you need to have in your collection. It is right up there with Kind of Blue as far as just necessary jazz albums to have. So, fantastic record. This is a 1972 reissue, but even the reissues of these are becoming insanely difficult to come across. And I believe that they have some newer reissues as well, but I like my 70s reissue. I think Atlantic came out with a really nice pressing on this, and I'm very happy to have it in the collection. Next, I have the John Coltrane Quartet. Coltrane. This is an absolute stunner of a record. This is John Coltrane with his famous quartet. Coy Tyner, Jimmy Garrison, and Elvin Bishop. Elvin Jones. Oh geez, forgive me of that. But this is seminal quartet music and beautiful artwork here on Impulse. Not his first album for Impulse. I had a copy of Africa Brass, but it was really beat. And honestly, I don't want to be listening to Coltrane if it's going to sound really, really harsh. I want it to be quiet, I want it to be crisp, because I want to hear every single phrase that this guy's laying down. And this is a fantastic record. It really splits the difference between those that like their lyrical jazz and those that like it a little bit more adventurous. This is a really nice split of those two. So great album. Fantastic stuff. This is a second printing variant, and again, these are getting very difficult to come across. I love that gloss, that original gloss on the Impulse label. It's my favorite label of all time. So really cool. And then here comes another grail, another absolute essential record. That is Duke Ellington and John Coltrane. Two jazz giants, one the old guard meeting the new guard, and John Coltrane sounds totally deferential to Duke in this album. He is really just playing a nice supporting role, but Duke is also being forced to kind of come into a little bit more of an adventurous place. And this was a really cool story. I found this one in a small shop that no longer exists in Appleton. It had a $30 price tag. I go up to the counter, tell them what I know about this record. Look at how clean that is. Absolutely gorgeous. First pressing on that. And he says, you know what? I'll give that to you for $20. You just don't get that type of generosity most days. So, really cool guy. And this is one that I have cherished ever since. Absolute classic of jazz right here. So, it's probably my top 10 favorite jazz albums. And then next, we have John Coltrane's Ballads with his quartet. And people seem to be, this is a controversial record. I don't know quite why. It's because he is a little bit more lyrical, a little bit more laid back, relaxed on this album. And some people just like their fiery John Coltrane, but this is like excellent mood music. Excellent for a romantic dinner. You want to impress a lady friend? Come on, son. This is the record to do it on. It's so good, so smooth, and Coltrane never sounded so soft, lovely, and romantic as he does in some of these cuts. So freaking good. It's not the most adventurous in his discography, but it's the most romantic. And there's something to be said about that. Then, one of my favorite collaborations of all time. John Coltrane and Johnny Hartman. The only vocalist that John Coltrane ever backed up. I think that's really cool. And this also is a first pressing. And as it is with most of these, you could eat off this. Absolutely gorgeous. I prefer with these type of records that they need to be clean. You want to hear every detail. You don't want scratches and scrapes and pops and clicks on these type of records. This isn't Led Zeppelin. This isn't even the blues where that adds charm. This needs to be heard in high fidelity. And this is, if you're looking for an alternative to the Frank Sinatras and the Dean Martins, nothing wrong with that. But this right here takes it to a new level. Excellent. Then Coltrane started to get weird. Started to go off into weird avant-garde places. And it starts right here. Coltrane live at Birdland. In my opinion, this is where he starts to push a little further, see how far his instrument can go. And really, more of the albums that are in this time period, he continues to broaden the sound of what his instrument can do. And this is a fantastic live set. Really, really hot. And the quartet sounds so good. It is one of my favorite live recordings by a jazz artist. Really, really cool. And then, this is in like my top 5 most valuable albums, my opinion. Yeah, but this is an original mono copy of A Love Supreme by John Coltrane. I know that I already told you that's John Coltrane, but I have to say it. I like the whole title because it makes me smile every single time, because this is such an amazing record. And you just don't see copies of this. And again, just in beautiful condition. Eat off of that. And this is where he takes the spiritualism and pushes it to a new place. And he really does, you feel like this is his prayer to God and that he is listening. He's like, because Coltrane is being a vessel through which the Spirit of the Lord is speaking. And it is amazing. I don't care what you believe. When you listen to this music, that's what you hear. It's amazing. Fantastic. Then this is where he kind of starts to let go of any idea of melodicism or keeping to a structure. Meditations. This was the final recording with his quartet, but he had added Rashid Ali and Pharoah Sanders. And most people, they're probably not going to dig on this too much. It's tough. It's there's a lot to digest. There's a lot of skronking going on. Pharoah Sanders is bringing a lot of weird, strange sounds. But for those who like free jazz, this is like as good as it gets. It's so freaking good. So, really nice record. Then we have Coltrane live at the Village Vanguard again. And I would love to get the first live at the Village Vanguard, because it's basically like the two sides of the coin. You have his first quartet, and I personally like the first one better, but this is where he was bringing in his avant-garde sounds, and Alice Coltrane is actually, his wife is on the piano here, and she brings this strange spiritual aspect to the music that was really complements Coltrane. The only thing that is lacking in this album is the mix is a little muddy. I wish that some of the instruments were popping a little bit more, but God, it's still a great record. Again, it's like Miles Davis. There's not one album here that I wouldn't suggest or wouldn't recommend. And then finally, I've got Coltrane's Sunship. This was released posthumously, and this is also recordings with his quartet. This is like the beginnings of him stretching out into avant-garde territory, and you know, with his famous quartet. And you can tell that out of all the students, like out of all the people in his group, McCoy Tyner was the one that was probably affected the most, because the work that he went on to do after this was very similar, but not too stranger out there. Sahara is a great example of, I think, the influence that this album had on him. So, really cool record and highly recommended. Not very expensive, too. So guys, that's the Coltrane collection. What did you guys think? Any records that you would like to add? I mean, there's so many that I would want. What Coltrane albums do you want? Let me know in the comments below. And I hope that you guys have a great night on your own personal oasis. Cheers.